Greetings, loved ones. Paisley Parvati Devi here with our weekly yoga philosophy share. Every Tuesday I put out a new video on beginners yoga philosophy, and I share from this book, The Yamas and Niyamas, Exploring Yoga's Ethical Practice by Deborah Adele. So if you're just tuning in for the first time today, I do have the full playlist of these videos available on my Facebook page, Livity Yogini, and also on YouTube under the name Livity Yogini. Today we are on the second to the last of the Niyamas. This is chapter 9, you guys, and wow, I can't believe that we're already almost to the end of the book. So yeah, if you want to see any of the previous videos, we do go through every chapter of this entire book together, and I'll post a link after this video is published to share with you where those playlists are. And be sure to like and subscribe if you want to continue seeing videos moving forward. Tag a friend, share this with someone who you feel like this content would resonate with them and help them in their lives. So if you missed last week's video, we started this chapter on Svadyaya, or self-awareness. So I definitely recommend going back and checking out that video before you watch this one. It's going to make a little bit more sense in terms of the context, since we're just doing the second half of this chapter today. And just to give a little bit more background on what the Yamas and Niyamas are, they are 10 tenets or guidelines for a way to live an ethical life, a life that's going to lead us to finding more inner peace and more happiness and contentment within ourselves. And the first 5 of these tenets are called the Yamas. They're known as the actions or behaviors to be restrained in order to find this inner contentment and inner peace. And then the second 5 tenets, the Niyamas, are actions to be cultivated or behaviors to be cultivated in order to maintain and find and cultivate this inner peace. So this actually is one of my favorite chapters, one of my favorite tenets on self-awareness. In Sanskrit, it is called Svadyaya, or self-study is how it directly translates. Let's get into it. So this section is called We Can't Be Afraid to Look. We need our eyes and hearts wide open to look at every ripple of disharmony that we experience. Another school massacre has just occurred as I write this, and it is the bloodiest yet. The world is full of pain and suffering and deeds of horror. As I look back on my life, it is the pictures of starving children in Africa, the carnage of soldiers in the Vietnam War, the loss of hope on a Nicaraguan mother's face, which have shaped my heart and moved me to compassionate action. If we hide the pictures and the reality from ourselves, how can our hearts grow? If we close our eyes, our very lives rest on a false foundation. We can't be afraid to look. In my travel of third world countries, I've noticed how little is hidden. The old, the sick, the dying, the hungry are not shut away like they are in this country, meaning the US. This is where this book was written, and that's one of the reasons that I actually chose this book, because she does a really great job of framing this for the Western mindset, even though it is an Eastern philosophy. So the old, the sick, the dying, the hungry are not shut away in other countries as they are here. The Guideline of Svadyaya invites us to do the same with ourselves, not to shut the unpleasant parts of ourselves away, but to carry them with kindness and compassion, knowing that God lives there too. I always feel like the section of the book that I'm reading really tends to just synchronize well with the theme of whatever I feel like is happening in the collective energy. And just earlier today, I was listening to a podcast called The Ghee Spot with Katie Silcox, one of my favorite Ayurveda teachers that I follow, and she was speaking on just this. We are in such turbulent times. 2020 has been such a crazy year for all of us and has affected all of us and the collective energy in really potent ways. And she was speaking on how it has caused all of our unconscious, collective unconscious stuff, the darkness, the heavy stuff that we've been leaning on for far too long or ignoring, or just accepting, you know, as a fundamental part of our society and reality that we can't ultimately change or improve, we just have to live with. And this pandemic and everything that's happened this year has really turned all of these things on their head, these things that aren't truly serving us. And so in order to transmute the energy, we can't simply continue to pretend that all of these things are just fine and that we can't do anything about them. In fact, we have to do something about them to move forward. And so this is all a chance for us on a collective level to sit with ourselves, sit with this pain and discomfort that's coming up on an unconscious level, and move through it. And to me, that's what the principle of Svadyaya, or self-study, really embodies as well. Learning to see ourselves as the darkness and the light, because both of those exist within us at any moment. They're a natural part of our existence in this plane. And our egos tend to go to like, oh, the light is good, this positive energy, I want that in my life, and shut out the things that we consider bad or wrong, painful. It's completely normal and natural. It's human nature to do that. But in order to heal and transcend this darkness and pain, we need to be able to sit with it, to honor and acknowledge it, and then we can move through it together. So, the Guideline of Svadyaya invites us to do the same with ourselves, not to shut the unpleasant parts of ourselves away, but to carry them with kindness and compassion, knowing that God lives there too. I remember when Gandhi was interviewed by a reporter who asked him if he ever got incensed or outraged at his oppressors. Gandhi solemnly replied that no, he didn't, because he knew what existed in the interior landscape of his own being. He was not afraid to look at the fullness of emotions inside himself, and because of that fearless act of witnessing his inner being, he was able to maintain courage rooted in kindness and compassion. Gandhi knew that denial cuts us off from the full reality of ourselves. So to ignore that pain, to push it down, and to distract ourselves instead with pleasure is cutting ourselves off from the full reality, the full experience of this reality. There is a Cherokee story in which the grandfather is explaining to his grandson that two animals live inside his heart, a wolf and a lamb. When the grandson asks what he is to do, the grandfather replies, "Feed the lamb." This story beautifully illustrates the reality of what sits inside us. We need to respect the wolf in us. If we don't, we may become self-righteous and vulnerable to being eaten by the wolf. Whenever we pretend isn't there, we'll unconsciously use us. But we can choose to feed the lamb and grow ourselves into someone more compassionate and kind, both to ourselves and to others. We must be willing to look at the selfishness and greed and anger that lies in us, but feed the greatness. The next section is titled The Role of the Ego. The ego is a function of the mind that organizes itself into I. The ego is not a bad thing. Without the ego, we wouldn't exist. The ego takes an event that the senses bring into awareness and makes it personal. For instance, the senses may bring in the information that a dog is barking. The ego makes it personal by saying, "I hear a dog barking." Then this message further gets entangled with the value judgment we place on the event. We will have an opinion about the dog barking based on our experience. I might be annoyed at the noise or tremble in fear because of a past experience where I was attacked. Or I might rush to pet the dog, remembering a childhood pet that I adored. We can see from this example how the ego takes ownership of a neutral experience by making it mine, and then colors it from the box of past experience. And in last week's video, we covered the beginning part of this chapter. We actually did an exercise where we were able to see how we each have our own personal perceptions, the way that we color the world. So each of us could have all of us could experience the same thing. We could all be in a room together and experience something, yet we would all be experiencing that thing in a slightly different way because we each have our own unique perception. We can see from this example how the ego takes ownership of a neutral experience by making it mine and then colors it from the box of past experience. The above process is how the mind is designed to function so that we can have the experience of separateness. It is the ego that allows the experience of a walk in the park, the taste of fine chocolate, or a telephone conversation with a friend. Where things get messy is when the ego forgets that its function is to organize the self and begins to believe itself to be the boss. When this happens, we get stuck in the I of being separate, and we make our belief system the model of reality. Our belief system is not wrong or right, but it is constraining. When we identify with these constraints, we run on old habits and we consent to being less than we are. As we unpack the boxes of our belief system, strong and often painful emotions can be released in the process. These feelings are often related to memories that we have unconsciously used to structure our reality. Similar to returning from a trip, where we have to take each item out of our suitcase and look at it as we unpack, we have to look at each box and the hidden emotions of experience that led to each layer of protective wrapping around ourselves. My experience is that the release can be quite unpleasant, and I sometimes feel like I'm swimming in muck. But I know that what might appear discouraging in the moment is often a cleansing release in disguise, an unpacking, so to speak. Has anyone experienced this? When you dive into whatever is problematic or painful in your psyche, often folks experience this when they're undergoing intense therapy. These things that have been buried or otherwise just not considered come up, and it can be quite painful, but they need to come up in order to be acknowledged and cleared. The path of growth is not a straight line. It does not look like anything that we think it should look like. In fact, often our belief system of what growth looks like is the very thing that stops our growth. What we think we know stops our inquiry. So if you think you already are good, you don't have any room for improvement, why would you try to improve yourself, right? But this is complacency. There's always room for improvement. There's always room to learn something new. The Buddhists remind us to have a beginner's mind, to know that we don't know, and many folks would agree that the more you learn, the more you realize that you really don't know. That's been true for me as well. The more I learn, the more scripture I read, the more I study, the more I realize that there's so much that I don't know, and that's beautiful. That's the great mystery. So the Buddhists remind us to have a beginner's mind, to know that we don't know. It is this stance of humility that opens the door to learning and revelation. The ability to bring the witness into play in our lives is the ability to step outside of ego limitation and find out there is something more. It is to find that you are a soul, and then to polish the ego so the ego becomes a function of the soul rather than a function of itself. Swami Veda writes, "It is by surrendering the limitations of its own banks that a river becomes the mighty ocean. Do not be afraid to throw away the trinkets of your ego to gain the diamond of grace. The process begins with growing our ability to witness." The power of the witness. I remember when our grandson Tyson was a toddler. Whenever he was asked by his parents to do something he didn't want to do, he would immediately switch to the third person, shifting his identity away from himself. He was always an I unless asked to do something against his wishes, in which case he became a he. If his dad told him it was time to go to bed, Tyson would reply, "He don't want to." And then Tyson would continue to play, totally confident that as long as he didn't personally identify with it, he didn't have to comply with his dad's directive. Watching Tyson switch back and forth between I and he was amazing to me, as well as quite humorous. And yet Tyson understood at this very young age the power of distancing himself from himself. The power of the witness, to distance ourselves from ourselves, is how we begin to see how we have made up our realities. And paradoxically, it is how our belief system begins to lose its power over us. Culturally, we are shaped to constantly engage in fixing and analyzing ourselves and others. As I watch myself and listen to others talk, I find this to be fundamentally true. I'm always hearing things like, "If I just fix this, then I'll be okay," or "I know this isn't a very good thing about me, but I'm working on it." It seems we all have an obsession to fix ourselves, and our attention is wrapped up in our shortcomings. Another thing that Katie Silcox was speaking on, the what's wrong attention. It is also easy and human nature to focus on what's wrong within ourselves, within the world, within the day-to-day, but ultimately this is not going to serve us because it creates an attitude of lack and just general negativity when it's been proven that cultivating gratitude really increases overall contentment and happiness. So yes, can be powerful and beneficial to acknowledge, those shortcomings in the areas that we have to improve, but it can be ultimately detrimental to focus on them to such an extent where we can't even appreciate all of the amazing things that we do have in life. And everybody has something to be grateful for, no matter what the situation is. We can find something to be grateful for. In Western culture, we tend to analyze, fix, and control just about everything. If we don't like something about ourselves or our lives, we keep trying to figure out what is wrong and then fix it, all while maintaining control to keep things as smooth as possible. Translation, keep things the way we like them. But what if rather than focusing on that, we simply focus on all of the things that are right, that we do enjoy and appreciate about ourselves and our situation? What would that mental narrative feel like? Eastern thought has a different idea about this. East parts ways with the West at the point of needing to understand and fix. It is here that Eastern thought introduces the idea of the witness. The witness is our ability to watch ourselves act and respond. It is our ability to watch our thoughts and our emotional disturbances. This ability is what gives us clues into our matrix of belief systems. It is how we know ourselves and the stories that run us. The witness is our ability to watch the ego rather than identify with it. The profoundness of this watching is that we begin to know ourselves as something different than who we thought we were. It is this ability to watch that begins to bring healing to our lives. I see everyone commenting, and I will respond after the reading, okay? So Yoga's Upanishads talk about two birds in a tree. One is busy flitting around from tree to tree. The other sits on the limb watching. As long as we identify ourselves with the bird flitting around, we will be stuck in our belief system. The more we identify with the bird who simply watches, the more we will begin to understand our belief system. And it is the understanding of how we have created our reality that marks progress in our growth. Seeing our conditioning is the victory. Knowing that we aren't who we thought we were begins to open up the possibility of knowing our true self. Yogi Raj Achala tells the story about taking his young son to the Mississippi River. The son, looking into the river, asked his dad if the river was polluted. Yogi Raj responded that no, the river is only carrying the pollution. The river itself is pure. Our minds are like the river carrying things in it. If we identify with what the mind is carrying, thoughts, stories, beliefs, then we will think we are those things. However, if we identify with the divine within us, the pure river, and merely watch the thoughts float by, we will know we are simply carrying the thoughts, stories, and beliefs. They are not who we are. So all of the mind stuff, all of the chatter, the story, the narrative, this idea of I am Paisley, I am female, I am living in this certain place, I do these certain things. These are all just the things that are floating in the river. But you yourself, you are the river, pure, clean, and completely free-flowing. But all of these things that we carry within us, that is, it's akin to the pollution in the sense, not that it's bad, but in the sense that it is clouding our perception of who we really are. It's adding a layer of illusion or distraction to the purity that is our true selves, this divine essence that flows within each of us. In another writing of Yoga's Upanishads, humans are referred to as God in a pot. Understanding this simple statement is the goal of self-study. As long as we identify with the pot, aka our bodies and minds, we suffer in our limitations. When we shift our identity from the pot to the God self within, we rest in our true self. And this is reminding me of something that an example she gives in the earlier part of the chapter. So if you didn't catch that video, I definitely recommend going back and watching it. She shares a story in which I think it's a parable, and they're saying that God decided to hide within each and every living creature because we would never find him there. It's a funny story. The context will make more sense in that other video, but it's funny because the last place that we would ever look for God is within ourselves. It's our human tendency to always look outside of ourselves for, for answers, for guidance and truth. But in reality, we each hold it within our own hearts. So the God self within. The God self within is called the Atman in yoga, Buddha nature in Buddhism, and Christ consciousness in Christianity. Meditation is an important aspect of self-study. It is a place where we grow the witness, recognize our belief systems, and begin to shift our identity from the pot to the God self within. Reading sacred scripture and inspirational biographies are other practices that bring us closer to our true identity. Engaging curiosity and a beginner's mind, knowing that we don't know, helps us step outside our neatly wrapped boxes. As we shift our attention to the God self within, the boxes of belief systems begin to fall away and we become free. Okay, so that's the end of this chapter on Svadyaya, or self-awareness, self-study. And at the end of every chapter, she does give some self-reflection assignments. So I read the first 2 for this chapter last week, and this week I'll invite you to just reflect on these other 2 reflection prompts or suggestions until we meet again next week for the very last chapter of the book, you guys. Woo! So this week, discover some of the boxes that you have yourself wrapped in. Do this by tracing all ripples of disharmony back to yourself. Notice what personal belief system caused the disharmony. Is your belief true? Are you experiencing reality or a box? Support your efforts with these words from a nice nin. We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. So our perceptions of our reality. Notice the layers of, it could be any given situation. For example, I want a cup of coffee in the morning. Well, so what is it about that cup of coffee? Is it because I want the energy? Is it because it's a habit? Is it because it's part of my morning ritual? Does it make me feel happy? Does it make me feel sick later on in the day? What is it about that cup of coffee? Why am I attached to that cup of coffee? Because it's not the coffee itself. The coffee itself is neutral. It's how we perceive the coffee. It's the role that this coffee plays in our narrative that keeps us reaching for it. So not putting any judgment on it, not saying, that's good or bad, but just simply observing, being that bird that is watching the other bird flit around in the tree, being the bird that's just sitting and watching, being the witness, embodying the one that watches, so that we can create a deeper understanding of ourselves and our narratives, our behaviors. That is what self-study is all about. This week, grow the power of your witness by watching all your actions and thoughts as if you were watching a movie. Begin to experience yourself as supreme strength, the fullness of wisdom, unquenchable joy. So existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute, Sat Chit Ananda. You are this beautiful existence and strength. You are this beautiful knowledge and fullness of wisdom. You are bliss absolute, unquenchable joy. So try to see yourself from that perspective of knowing that whatever happens outside of me, it's all objectively there. It's just outside of me, and my relationship with it is what's going to impact me more so than that thing itself. Going back to the coffee. The coffee's just there. The coffee's not good or bad. What is my relationship to the coffee? Let's explore that a little bit and see, if we apply this to every day-to-day mundane scenario, we can see over time, oh, when this happens with this person, this is the narrative that I have. It's a skill that we're building. We're strengthening the mental muscle of being in this place of the witness and simply observing ourselves, our ego, self-study. Thank you guys for tuning in. So that's the end of the content. I just want to plug, I have one necklace on today that I made from, I have many handmade necklaces that I create and sell, and I love to chant prayer and mantra into them as I make them. I put so much love and intention in and hand weave them out of hemp. So this is available for sale. I also have 11 others available for sale, and I just posted them all to my story. I will also make an actual post on them, about them, on Facebook and Instagram. So if you need to grab any Christmas gifts or holiday gifts for your loved ones, I got you. And if you want to treat yourself, I got you. If you made it this far in the video, I'll give you a 10% discount. Just say, let's use the word niyama. Niyama is the magic word for the 10% off on necklaces. I also sell my hand-drawn original coloring book, perfect gift for adults and children alike. I have some magical cacao that I'm selling, organic cacao from Guatemala, direct trade from the amazing Mayan women who produce it. Yes, that's all I have for you guys today. I love you all. Thank you so much for your time, energy, and attention. Until next time, peace.